What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping in with a pretty big Destiny 2 update. And this one comes in the form of This Week at Bungie, but of course they're talking about Season of the Worthy. So they jump in and talk about power gains, and they are increasing the level cap for gear drops by 40 points, so powerful gear will be able to drop up to a power of 1000, which is pretty crazy. They also jump in and give us a significant list of changes to exotic armor pieces for various classes, patch note previews for Season of the Worthy, Eververse changes and adjustments to direct purchase, and there are some important Bungie updates. We're going to talk about a potential mystery character and a couple of other things in the video. So guys, as always, I hope you enjoy this one, but without further delay, let's get into it. Now firstly, before we talk about Season of the Worthy updates, we did get kind of an unexpected update from Bungie, and I'm sure many of you guys have heard about coronavirus. Obviously something that's been going on for a few weeks now, and Bungie have actually decided to have their developers work from home for the time being. So they say with the recent spread of the virus into the US, and with a particular density of cases found in the greater Seattle area, which is where Bungie are located, they say they've been actively working on plans over the last few weeks to ensure the health and safety of employees and partners, both locally and globally. While health and safety is the top priority, we also recognize the importance of maintaining the continuity of our regular Bungie business operations, and have rapidly built a remote work infrastructure to best support this. And so they've activated the fully remote work infrastructure and policy for all Bungie employees across the globe, with the goals of prioritizing the safety of employees and continuing to develop and deliver on a game we love for our community. And so basically Bungie will be managing Destiny 2 from home for a little while, and obviously they've come up with a few technical solutions for being able to still work on the game in some respects. And they say that while there is a possibility that the change could affect patching in the short term, they'll be sure to keep players informed about those schedules as much as possible, and most immediately, they will still be launching Season of the Worthy on March 10th, followed by the start of Trials of Osiris on March 13th. So obviously this is something that we haven't seen happen in the past. As Bungie say, it could affect kind of updates in the short term, patching and bug fixes for things that are found very early on in the new season potentially. And so we'll have to see how things will be affected in the long term, but obviously very good on the most part that Bungie can actually do this and are prioritizing the health and safety of their employees above work itself until things start to improve. Now though, as we get into the content featured in This Week at Bungie, they're talking about the update for Season of the Worthy. And on the subject of power, they say in Season of the Worthy, you'll be challenged in not only Trials of Osiris, but in Legendary Lost Sectors and Grandmaster Nightfalls. Here's a quick update from the dev team on what's changing on day 1. So they jump straight in and say that they're raising the level cap for gear drops by 40 points, and that does mean that powerful gear will now be able to drop up to 1000. And so pinnacle drops will go up to 1010. But they say the soft cap has also been effectively raised by 50 points, and gear drops from nearly all sources will continue to be upgrades until 950 power, and then powerful reward sources will not be required to progress to 950. They say as well that they are looking to make some quality of life updates in the pinnacle band, and starting in update 2.8.1, which is going to be one that will get mid-season for Season of the Worthy, so possibly in April. They say they will be upgrading some existing powerful rewards to pinnacle rewards, and there are weekly Crucible, Strike, and Gambit challenges, as well as the weekly Clan Engram, and with this change, they want to increase the total number of pinnacle power sources in the game. And so obviously a few adjustments to power right there, and some more significant changes than what we've seen in previous seasons at least. But on the subject of artifact power for trials, they reiterate that the short-term fix is to disable the artifact power bonus while in trials and Iron Banner. And unfortunately, Season of the Worthy has already been released for certification, so we won't be able to disable the artifact's power for the first Trials weekend. We have a fix in-house to disable it, and are testing it this week, and hope to deploy it on Tuesday, March 17th. We really wish you could have gotten it for the launch weekend, but we also expect the first Trials weekend to be one impacted by the artifact the least. And of course, players will have much less time to increase the artifact power before their first Trials, so pretty interesting, something that they're not going to be able to introduce on that first week of Trials, but hopefully on the second week of the season, they'll be able to get that update in that'll actually disable the artifact in endgame PvP. Let us know what you think about that, but of course they say that the long-term plan is to enable a power cap for Trials and Iron Banner, and they're investigating the work required for that. So there will be a short-term fix, and then a longer-term fix. But bear in mind, that first weekend of Trials isn't going to have anything actually disabling artifact power. Now though, they move on and talk about changes to Eververse, and there are going to be a few different changes for this season. Initially, Bright Engrams will no longer be available for purchase from the Eververse store, So in the place of Bright Engrams, a new module will become available on the Eververse store starting in Season of the Worthy, and this daily rotating module will feature one item from a small selection of ships, sparrows, ghosts and finishers that were offered in previous seasons. And these are going to be available to purchase directly for silver at a discount from the original price. So that's kind of an interesting adjustment right there. And they do give us an image preview of some of the items for Eververse in Season of the Worthy. So firstly, we've got new armor, as always. Some of that stuff looks pretty cool. And I'm sure, as always, that the Eververse store will be stocked with plenty of new cosmetic stuff. But Bungie do give a final preview of patch notes that we'll get on Tuesday, so there will be exotic armor changes for the Hunter, and for Assassin's Cowl, the invisibility and healing effect now triggers on powered melee, both against combatants and guardians and finishers. The duration of the invisibility granted by the exotic increases based on the tier of the enemy defeated, and arc staff kills will no longer activate the perk. So some interesting changes there. For the Frosties, they've changed the ability regeneration so that it no longer stacks multiplicatively with other class ability energy generating perks. For Khepri Sting, all smoke bombs will now deal 150% damage while wearing the exotic. That is a pretty nasty buff for that. And then for Orpheus Riggs, the maximum amount of super that you regain from the exotic with a single use of Shadow Shot is 50%. And then for Younger Hamkara's Spine, they've increased the explosion radius for trip mines by 14%. So some fairly unexpected adjustments right there. For the Titan though, with Ashen Wake, killing an enemy with a fusion grenade while wearing the exotic now refunds grenade energy. And the amount of energy refunded scales based on the tier of the enemy that you kill. There are a few bonuses they're using right there, where energy returns are actually based on kind of the level or the tier of a particular enemy that you take down. For Antaeus wards, the shield created during the slide will no longer allow chip damage through. They fixed a bug with Doomfang Pauldrons, where they would sometimes grant super energy from melee kills while in a super. For Dune Marchers, they've increased the radius of the static charge to 20 meters from 12. For Mark 44 standard sides, they've reduced the delay from the start of sprinting until the overshield comes to 0.5 seconds, which is down from 1.25 seconds. And then for One-Eyed Mask, the target marking from the exotic has been replaced with target highlighting, and this eliminates the ability to detect targets through walls. It also no longer provides a damage bonus when defeating the marked target, and they've restored the previous overshield granted by defeating the marked target, which now has a duration of 6 seconds, down from 8. And then we have the Severance Enclosure, and the explosion now triggers on powered melee, both against combatants and guardians, as well as finishers, and the radius and damage of the explosion created by the exotic increases based on the tier of the enemy defeated. And then we have the Warlock, so Apotheosis Veil is now going to be guaranteed to drop with a minimum of plus 16 to intellect. The Controverse Hold has had the damage reduction granted by the exotic reduced to 20, which is down from 40. For the Sanguine Alchemy, it has received a complete redesign. Its new perk, Blood Magic, allows the wearer to pause the countdown timer of any rift they're standing in by getting weapon kills, which extends the rift's duration. And so not only are you kind of extending the super or something, you're actually completely delaying the timer before that disappears by getting kills, which is pretty cool. But for Ophidian aspects, they've increased the lunge range of all Warlock melees, even if the ability is on cooldown. And then for Verity's Brow, the buff provided by the exotic now increases your grenade damage by 10% per stack, and the buff to allies, grenade recharge rate, now kicks in when you cast your grenade. And the exotic will provide a text buff notification indicating how many allies are currently benefiting from the increased grenade recharge. That actually sounds like a pretty cool buff. Definitely a mixed bag, but that's certainly more than I expected in the way of changes to exotics, so I'd love to hear your thoughts about it down below. Of course, for investment, they have increased the number of armor sets available from world drops to 11 sets, up from 3, and this will include armor from faction rallies, and players who own previous faction rally ornaments may apply them to the sets. That's definitely good. And then Prime Engrams will now more reliably drop armor with higher overall stat rolls and spikier distributions. Exotic armor will now more reliably drop with higher overall stats, and legendary armor has an improved chance of receiving higher overall stat rolls, although low stat rolls will still be a thing. Of course, there will be other changes that we'll get in that March update alongside Season of the Worthy on Tuesday, but for those we will have to wait for full patch notes. So obviously a few things to take on board there, the power changes, as well as the Eververse adjustments, and then a whole bunch of sandbox changes to some of the exotic armor. So once again, give us your thoughts on the changes down below. Now though, moving away from updates and all of those kind of things, a lot of folks are talking about a particular scene in the recent reveal trailer for Season of the Worthy, and are asking the question about the character that we can see on screen. And very specifically, this has sparked conversation about Uldren. And there is some lively debate about whether we could potentially be seeing the character right here. It is something that I thought about briefly when the trailer actually released, but didn't want to overly speculate. But nonetheless, it would appear that a lot of other folks are discussing the possibility as well. So initially, why is the discussion even taking place? And I guess the primary reason for that would be the placement of the character that we can see. In the scenes in the tower, which do show civilians kind of watching the approach of the Almighty, which also in turn does suggest that we'll likely see the Almighty in the skybox above the city. But nonetheless, we see the character in amongst only civilians and other vendors in the tower, so it certainly isn't obvious that any other Guardians are kind of watching what's going on. And seeing as how close this character is to the camera in this scene, the placement definitely does seem significant. If I had to guess, we're either seeing a tease to a character, and of course that could be Uldren, I guess, but it's also possible that Bungie are teasing something like a new exotic helmet, as we discussed just the other day. I'd also say that Uldren is much more of a hunter character, yet the character we see here kind of appears to be wearing warlock-type robes. The very interesting thing about the helmet though, and the one which makes folks wonder even more about the possible link, would be that in the Amnestia lore tab, where we learn that Uldren is nearby, camping somewhere in the European Dead Zone, it did reference the fact that due to hostility, he stays out of the way of other Guardians, and if he can't do that, he keeps his helmet on, always. And that's definitely interesting. Obviously, we are seeing a character with a helmet in amongst a bunch of other folks that don't have helmets on in the tower. But I also wanted to say that loosely speaking, you might say that the helmet resembles something similar to a crow, or at least it isn't dissimilar to that kind of bird skull shape, so I think that's interesting as well, but yeah, realistically, the possibilities include a mystery character, and we know that there is potential scope for Uldren to return at some point in the future. Some folks even think he might come back if we see a reprise of Dreaming City content further down the road in Season 11. But outside of this, Bungie definitely placed this character or player here intentionally, and so I'd be curious, what do you guys think? Could a tease to Uldren be coming this early? And do you think realistically that's even what we're looking at? Or do you think this could be some secret armor or an exotic specifically? I think it's definitely a curious conversation considering how many folks have spoken about it, so I'd love to see your thoughts in the comment section. Something I wanted to speak about in this final part of the video would be some really cool early development gameplay for Destiny 1. And this was recently shared once again by David Canlan from Bungie, and he was a UI designer at Bungie from the Halo years all the way through Destiny development as well. But since he's no longer working on the franchise, he pointed out some of this gameplay of the development of UI throughout Destiny's development. And a few folks are speaking about this now. We did actually point out some of the gameplay shown in these videos months ago. It was probably over a year ago now on the channel. And obviously the primary reason for showing the video clips off is to show the UI development specifically, but of course, because it's happening alongside the rest of the development of the game, that means we can see Destiny in some of its very earliest forms right here. So there are areas that look a little bit like the European Dead Zone. As we've spoken about in the past, DDZ was a location that initially Bungie wanted to ship in Destiny 1, but they couldn't due to technical restrictions, so they ended up shelving that and using it in D2 of course. And here you can see really basic models for weapons, and pretty basic movement and gunplay compared to what we have now. And obviously in the UI, how it's displaying ammo, abilities and everything like that are things that were in the really early stages. It's really cool as well to see the tower here. Obviously this is the D1 tower, but you still have the postmaster in that same kind of hut on the left hand side. We can see dead orbit logos and everything like that. Obviously they retextured this and even redesigned the space numerous times, but you can see how it developed and changed from this point. Then some of the really curious things we get to see are parts of Venus in extremely early development. We see some areas in the Ishtar sink right here, but then onto some areas on Mars. This actually is the space immediately where you'd head into the Valis Ta'arak strike in D1, so that's pretty cool. Over on the right hand side, you can see the tunnel entrance where we'd actually head in there. Kind of crazy really, it's almost like seeing a PlayStation 2 version of Destiny or something. And one thing that I thought was really curious, considering a lot of these were captured around 2011 or before, is that we see a Warlock cast a Rift or even a Well of Radiance right there. Whichever way, these were abilities that weren't actually revised and fully developed until Destiny 2 or even Forsaken came out, which is pretty crazy. So I just thought we'd go through some of that stuff in case you guys hadn't seen it, and I'll link the full show reel from David Canlan down below. Obviously, he previously worked at Bungie, but now is a UX designer at Monolith Games, which is pretty cool, so definitely need to get some further insights. But for today, guys, that's everything we have to talk about in this video. Obviously, it's good to get further details about Season of the Worthy, so let us know your thoughts on any of the stuff that Bungie spoke about in TWAB. But if you're new to the channel and you want to keep up to date with Season of the Worthy and Destiny 2 content in general, then be sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so I can keep you up to date with everything related to the game. But if you've enjoyed the video, a rating below really helps me out down below as well, guys. But otherwise, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you have an awesome day.